You're being ridiculous, he snapped, pacing the room like a caged predator. And you're being impossible, you shot back, arms crossed over your chest. The tension between the two of you had been brewing since last night, simmering beneath the surface until it finally boiled over into a full-fledged argument. Over what? Well, neither of you could really remember that far back. At this point, something about the way he chewed his food too loudly, or maybe it was the way you left the cabinets open, or maybe it was the fact that he'd been out too late the night before without telling you. Whatever, it didn't matter. Not anymore. What mattered was that he was standing there looking like every bit of the brooding, dangerous man you knew him to be. And you were across the room, chin tilted up defiantly despite the exhaustion weighing on you. You're so damn stubborn, he growled, running a hand through his dark hair. Oh, I'm stubborn? What about you? You shot back, voice rising in pitch. You're the one who refuses to admit when you're wrong. I swear to God, it's like talking to a what? He challenged, cutting you off. He stepped closer, his voice was low now, but controlled. But beneath it you could hear the frustration. Your lips parted, but instead of a word, a sudden wave of dizziness crashed over you. The room suddenly tilted for a moment. You thought it was just the heat of the argument getting to you, but as the ends of your vision started to blur, a strange ringing filled your ears. You blinked, trying to focus, but everything felt off. Your hands trembled slightly as you braced yourself against the back of the couch. He was still talking, still caught up in whatever ridiculous debate the two of you had gotten yourselves into. But his voice sounded distant, like he was speaking on the other end of a tunnel. Ryan. His voice was sharper now, but his tongue seemed a little bit lighter, while yours felt heavy in your mouth. Your words lodged in your throat. You barely had time to register the concern that was flickering in his dark eyes before your knees buckled beneath you. The last thing you saw was his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion, as if his world had tilted completely. A single breath, a single moment of stillness, then, Brian, what the hell, this isn't funny. Silence. His chest tightened and a cold sort of panic seemed to claw at him, all the way up to his throat as he took a step forward. Hey. His voice was lower, rough with something dangerous, close to fear. He crouched beside you, shaking your shoulder lightly. Come on, enough of the dramatics, get up. Nothing. His pulse hammered against his ribs. You weren't playing around. Shit. For a moment he didn't move. His breath was caught somewhere between his chest and his throat, his brain refusing to accept what had just happened. Then, reality hit him like a freight train. Shit! He hissed under his breath again, his hands moving to your shoulders as he shook you harder this time. Baby, come on, this isn't funny. Nothing. His jaw tightened. His heart was pounding so loudly that you could hear it in his ears, drowning out everything. He was always in control. He didn't panic, not normally. He always had a sense of controlling everything. Always the one making the calls, the one keeping his composure no matter how bad things got. That was his job, his role, but it was different. Because it was you. He pressed 2 fingers against your neck, feeling the pulse. When he found it, steady but faint, he let out a breath. He hadn't realized he was even holding. His grip on you tightened, and for a second he just stared. You looked so small like this, so fragile. God, he hated it. Ryan, he muttered again, his voice softer, almost gentle. Come on, baby, open your eyes. Nothing. His teeth clenched and his mind began racing. Had you eaten today? Had you been feeling sick? He ran over every interaction you two have had in the last 24 hours, every moment leading up to this. You seemed fine. I mean, yeah, angry, sure, but that wasn't new. Then again, he thought back to the way you'd been gripping the couch just before you fell, the way your breathing had changed, the slight tremble in your hands. Had you been feeling like this the whole time? Had you even known something was wrong? If you had, why the hell hadn't you said anything? Damn brat, he muttered, but there was no heat behind his words, just a quiet kind of worry. The kind that he never really let himself feel. With a deep breath, he slipped an arm under your legs and the other around your back, lifting you off the floor with ease. You were warm against him, your head lolled slightly against his chest as he carried you to the couch. He laid you down carefully, brushing a few strands of hair away from your face before pulling back to look at you properly. You were still out. His fingers twitched. He wasn't good at this. He wasn't the type to fuss about people or worry about anybody but himself. He didn't have the patience for it. He didn't even have the heart for it. At least that's what he used to believe. Damn it, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. He sat beside you, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together. For a long time he just watched you. His mind a mess of emotions he didn't want to deal with. Anger, annoyance, guilt, etc. And something else, something heavier. He hated seeing me like this. He hated it even more that he had no idea what to do about it. Minutes passed. He wasn't sure how many exactly. Time felt a bit strange, stretched thin between his worry and the quiet sound of your breathing. It was small. A shift of your fingers, a wrinkle of your nose, but it was enough. He straightened immediately, eyes sharp as he watched you like a hawk as he began to wake. And just like that, the mask was in place. You're a fucking idiot, he said the second your eyes began to flutter open. A slow blink. Confusion. What? You passed out. He cut in, his voice flat and unreadable. Just dropped in the middle of some goddamn argument, like some kind of dramatic little... He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You scared the hell out of me. Your eyes widened slightly, but the remains of your unconsciousness slipping away. He was glaring at you, hard, but there was something else in his expression. Something you couldn't quite catch, but it was there. Something would be impossible if you didn't know him. Worry. You realized it was real, honest worry. Your throat ran dry. I don't, he interrupted, leaning forward slightly. His gaze burned into yours like a flame. Don't you dare try to brush this off. You hesitated, the weight of his stare making it impossible to look away. I didn't mean to, you murmured, his jaw tightened. That's not the point, he said, his voice low. The point is, you weren't okay and you didn't say shit about it. Silence stretched between you. Finally, he sighed, rubbing a hand over his face before fixing you with a look that was softer than before. You need to take care of yourself, he muttered. You scared me. Your breath hitched. He never really said things like that. Never admitted to fear or concern or anything remotely that made him seem a little bit vulnerable. But now here he was. Your fingers twitched against the couch. I'm sorry, he said quietly. He scoffed. Yeah, you better be. Silence. Then, are you okay now? The question was softer than anything else he'd ever said, almost hesitant. Yeah, I think so. He studied for a moment longer, as if making sure you weren't lying. And then with a small shake of his head, he leaned back against the couch, closing his eyes. You're still a brat, he muttered. A small smile took the corner of your lips. His did as well, almost like he was fighting back a smirk. For a long moment, the two of you just sat there. The tension of the argument had drained out of the room, leaving something heavier. Something quieter. You shifted slightly on the couch, your body still sluggish, and your head was still light. The dizziness wasn't completely gone yet, but at least you were conscious. At least you could see him sitting there, arms crossed and brows furrowed, jaw tight. He looked pissed. Not pissed, like pissed, but you didn't know how to explain it. You swallowed. I swear, I really didn't mean to. His glare shut you up instantly. I told you not to brush it off. Your mouth snapped shut. His eyes locked onto yours once more, sharp and unwavering. What happened? His voice was lower now, calmer, but it wasn't a question, it was a demand. You pressed your lips together hesitantly. What were you supposed to say? That you felt weird for a while, but you didn't think a big deal of it? That you were ignoring signs and pushing past it because you didn't want to seem weak, or because you didn't want to give him a reason to call you fragile, or worse, because you were too stubborn to stop fucking arguing? He was still watching you, waiting for an answer, and the longer the silence stretched, the harder it kept your gaze. Finally, you sighed. I don't know, okay? I don't know, I felt weird and dizzy, you muttered. His expression didn't change. Since when? You fidgeted under his stare. I don't know. His jaw ticked. Try again. You swallowed. Maybe a little earlier in the day, I don't know. His expression darkened. How much earlier? You hesitated. Morning? A sharp intake, you winced. His hands flexed on the arms of the chair, digging into the fabric of his own sleeves. His whole body was tense, like he was trying very, 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 very hard not to lose it. You felt like this all day, he repeated, his voice eerily calm. And you didn't think to mention it. You looked away. It wasn't that bad. Silence. The kind that made your skin prickle in the air feel heavy. And then his voice dropped. Not that bad. You didn't answer, because really what could you say? He took a slow, measured breath through his nose. When he spoke again, his voice was clipped, like he was struggling to hold something back. Let me get this straight, he said. You spent an entire day feeling like shit. You didn't eat. You didn't drink. You didn't rest, and instead of saying something, you decided to push it through it, and when your body finally collapses, you did it in front of me. You winced. Do you have any idea how that looked? Your stomach twisted in the way that his voice strained at the last word. Your lips parted, but no sound came out, because right now, as you looked at him, you saw it. The pure worry, the raw, barely contained fear buried underneath all his anger. You swallowed. I didn't mean to scare you. I swear, you murmured. He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Yeah, well, you did. Guilt crept in, coiling tight in your chest. You wanted to argue, you wanted to tell him it wasn't a big deal and to shut up, that you were fine, that he didn't have to act like this, but the words were stuck in your throat. Because deep down you knew he was right. You probably should have taken better care of yourself. You should have said something, should have done something, other than pretend you were fine. You let out a slow, reluctant breath. I'm sorry. He didn't say anything, just stared at you, something unreadable flickering behind his dark eyes. Then after what felt like forever, he exhaled sharply and stood up. Where are you? You asked, but he cut you off. Stay there, he ordered, walking towards the kitchen. He frowned, but he didn't argue, not this time. A few minutes later, he was back, carrying a glass of water and what looked like a small snack. He set them down on the coffee table in front of you before turning his gaze to you. Eat, he said simply. You hesitated, going to complain, but he arched a brow. Don't make me feed you. Your face warmed up. I can do it myself, you muttered. Reaching for the water first, he didn't respond, just crossed his arms and looked at you, watching as you started to eat the snack. You felt his gaze on you the entire time, and it was strange. Not bad, just different, like he was still trying to process what had just happened. Like he was a little bit shaken up. You were done. When you set the glass back down, your voice shifted slightly. Thank you, he said, voice softer than before, and he didn't reply. Then after a moment, I can't have you doing that again. You looked up. His expression was serious, his usual sharpness dulled with something softer, something real. You pass out like that, and I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do, he admitted. I can't stand there, and he exhaled, shaking his head. I need to know that you're okay. that you're not just pushing through it until shit gets really bad. Your heart clenched. He wasn't saying it outright, but you understood. He cared, and he didn't know how to say it. And for someone like him, someone who never let anybody get close to him, that was probably as close as you were ever going to get to a confession. But that was enough for you.